we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's September 4th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, now both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. South Korean soccer player Son Heung-min has reached another milestone after scoring his first goal of the 2023-24 season on Saturday. Son bagged a hat trick which led his team Tottenham Hotspur to victory against Burnley. According to ESPN, Sonny now has more Premier League goals than Cristiano Ronaldo. Moving on, India is rapidly making progress conducting space missions. A little over a week after becoming the first to land a rover near the moon's south pole, the country has sent a spacecraft to examine the outer layers of the sun. The Aditya L1 spacecraft lifted off from Sriharkota on Saturday and will travel a total of 1.5 million kilometers from Earth over 4 months. Indian scientists are hoping that their solar mission will add to knowledge about space weather, which is important for future missions and to protect satellites and spacecraft. And moving on to our last story, hundreds of thousands of teachers have gathered in Seoul today to commemorate the death of a young teacher in her 20s who took her own life in an elementary school classroom. Today is the 49th day since she has passed, and dozens of schools announced their plans to call classes off on this day. But the Ministry of Education has warned that such collective action would be illegal and that teachers or principals could face criminal charges. Nonetheless, teachers have gone out to the streets, and many of them also participated in the regular Saturday rallies that have been going on for 7 whole weeks now. The rally this time around gained more momentum as 2 more teachers also took their own lives in the recent days. Since the death of their colleague, teachers have voiced how much stress they had to handle on a daily basis, and they asked officials to amend ambiguous clauses in the Child Welfare Act that can hold them accountable for child abuse, even when they might be trying to protect their own lives or practicing necessary discipline. And the government agreed at the end of July to make a few legal revisions to enhance teachers' rights in the classroom. And on August 23rd, the Education Ministry revealed its latest plans. But teachers are still demanding more concrete regulations and actual results. That's why they've also filed a complaint against the Education Minister for abusing his authority and threatening to criminally charge teachers that are participating in today's rally. Now, here in the studio, what do you guys think about this story?
Well, I'm absolutely sickened by the way that the Education Minister has dealt with this situation, more threatening the teachers rather than hurting them. I think that person needs to take a very good look in the mirror. But it is very important that teachers, they feel safe in their workplace. Otherwise, we will see a dangerous decrease in this workforce. Regulations do need to be enforced for education, for teachers, students, as well as parents, because parents are also the ones that can lead to this situation. Many, if not most teachers, become teachers because they're passionate about their work. It takes a lot of passion and a lot of patience. But if we can't ensure the safety of our teachers and even our students as well, who can blame them for wanting to choose to become a teacher? I mean,
Exactly.
Not wanting to become a teacher, sorry. And who will teach? Clearly, a lot of the parents that, have been pushing teachers to do extra work for them or whatever they're doing, abusing the teachers, they're not fit enough to be a parent. So I wouldn't trust them teaching my children. So things need to happen very quickly.
Exactly, especially if Korea is struggling with one of the lowest birth rates in the world. Might as well even enhance teachers' authority and rights in the classroom because education is such a big part to raising a child, which we will be talking about later on in the discussion. Now, Chi, I would now like to focus on today, September 4th being designated as a day to commemorate the 49th day since this 20-something-year-old elementary school teacher took her own life, right? And in Korea, I know it's traditional that after 49 days passed in Buddhist culture, you think that they now go on to their second rebirth, right? But do you agree that some teachers and even students taking today off should be a regular thing, or do you agree that they should have?
Well, opinions are really divided regarding this. I think some people believe that it will interrupt the whole education system, and even the government has expressed opposing views regarding this act. But I personally think taking this day off is more meaningful than going to school, really, because it will be an opportunity for students and parents to become better aware of the importance of teachers' rights and their roles in public education. And I believe like learning mathematics or humanities, Korean, English for one day is, I mean, you can take a day off and know values that are more important beyond those subjects.
That's a very good comment. All right, that was our news feed for this Monday. Let's now head into our discussion topic of the day. Last week, South Korea saw its fertility rate drop to yet another record low. And the latest government report found that in the second quarter of 2023, South Korea's fertility rate dropped to a whopping 0.7. Now, officials are trying to grapple with the world's lowest birth rate. Take a look at the screen to find out what their latest ideas are. Creating a better environment for parents. That's the way officials are aiming to boost birth rates in Korea. Here's a few strategies suggested so far. Seoul City said it would give out monthly subsidies of $242 to families who rely on grandparents or relatives to take care of their children. Specifically, those who spend 40 or more hours taking care of children per month. This is quite common for double-income households. Another proposal made by the Seoul mayor is allowing more foreign nationals to work as babysitters. Currently, immigration laws only allow foreign nationals with permanent residency, marriage immigrants, or ethnic Koreans from China to work as babysitters. If this law were to be amended, an influx of foreign workers as sitters would lower employment costs. Officials are hoping this will lessen the financial burden of parents. To find out whether these policies suggested will encourage more people to have children, let's ask our panelists in the studio what they think, starting with you, Ji-hee. I know that the government has announced that it will kick off a pilot program to allow 100 foreign domestic helpers to start working in Seoul as early as December, right?
That's right. So the Labor Ministry announced that it will kick off a pilot program, like you said, to introduce foreign domestic workers to reduce the burden of housework as well as caregiving for parents, and especially to prevent a declining birth rate and women's career breaks in the country. Now, like you said, starting in the second half of the year, 100 foreign workers from the Philippines and other Southeast Asian countries will provide domestic and childcare services in Seoul. And the workforce will be provided by a government-certified domestic worker service provider, and the cost and work format, which have garnered much attention, will be determined based on the minimum wage as well as the commuting expenses. Now, however, there's expected to be further confusion before the introduction of this plan due to concerns about the trustworthiness of these foreign workers, as well as the whole possibility of decline in the quality of childcare services.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that as a parent, and to be honest with you, I'm not exactly a fan of hiring overseas nannies, and it's not really to do with where they're from, but like more so, you know, I have a little bit of trust issues. You know, they're looking after my baby and they're in my house. But when you really break it down, it could also be a cultural thing, a language thing, or a belief in raising a child. So, example, in Australia, we raise a child very differently from here in Korea, and vice versa. So there might be certain things that the parents don't agree with and that the nanny doesn't agree with. For example, languages also could be a problem in my opinion. Let's just say the nanny isn't completely fluent in Korean, though we expect them to be. What happens if my baby is suddenly sick and needs to go to the emergency room? She's not able to translate that very well. So, you know, I'm a little bit on the side of not wanting to hire the overseas.
Yeah,
nannies.
and another opinion a lot of critics are having towards this issue is that there's not enough clear guidance as to who will be accepted and what their working conditions would be.
Right.
So it's also considering their rights, migrants' rights. For instance, there might be room for exploitation.
Right.
For instance, when will they be able to take their time off? How much would they be earning in a minimum like hourly wage? These details need to be coming out in order for us to see what's going to be happening. happening, considering the fact that we're going to be seeing this policy kick off in December. But Walter, another policy that Seoul City actually suggested, as we mentioned in the introductory video, is giving out monthly subsidies to households relying on relatives, for instance, like the parents' parents, the grandparents, to assist with parenting. What do you think about that?
Well, like with the state that the Korean economy is in, which is not great, every little bit does help, and we do, I guess, accept a lot of the subsidies that we are getting as parents. But I don't think this example, what was it, $242, is going to sway people to increase the birth rate, in my opinion. I'm not sure what the $242 is supposed to go to be honest with you. If anything, it's just to feed the extra mouth, but doesn't help the baby situation. You know, anyway, in Korea, a large majority of retired grandparents enjoy looking after their grandchildren, so they will do it for free, and it means, you know, we don't have to pay them, but we will if it's very necessary to me. Necessary for parents, I guess. For me, I really don't want to rely on my grandparents to look after my child, just for the fact that I want my own way to raise my child other than the older way.
Yeah.
But I don't want to sound negative, but I don't think this is the answer to increase the birth rate. But some people could argue at least they're trying something.
Yeah, and to play the devil's advocate to what you just said right now, I think giving out these monthly subsidies, although there are grandparents that would be more than happy to look after their grandchildren, it's so hard. You know, you've been raising a child.
Yeah.
It's not an easy task to be looking after one. So I think that's why it's encouraging a lot more people to go out, be able to work whilst not feeling that emotional burden that you're like leaving your child with your parents. As a lot of the traits of millennials and Gen Z is that they don't want to be, you know, causing a lot of harm to the other person or making them feel burdensome for doing their own task. So you guys don't seem to be the biggest advocates of these two policies suggested so far. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what you guys do think needs to be done in order to encourage birth rates here in Korea. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Before that, why don't we first look at the reality of being a parent in Korea to find out what the essential issues are?
Right. So let's take a look at the screen to determine who is responsible for raising children in South Korea. Now, the graph shows that grandparents account for the largest share of caregiving. This is because double-income families often rely on their parents to provide care for their children while they're at work. Now, in such cases, grandparents become an essential part of the family support network, providing both emotional and practical support to their grandchildren. Now, parents account for 37% of caregiving responsibilities, still remaining a critical source of support for their children. And then comes the emergency childcare service, which refers to hiring a domestic worker, which accounts for 15%. But this is usually quite costly, and it becomes difficult to afford unless the family has a high income. So as a result, many women are forced to either quit their jobs or leave their babies at daycare centers. And they say that Korean parents are filling the childcare gap with private education because there's no one really to take care of them, which is causing the age of private education to become increasingly early and their dependency to go up as well.
So we could say Seoul City did nail that in the sense that they knew what it's like for parenting. They realized that it's very costly to hire a nanny, and also that grandparents are taking care of children these days. Walter, would you like to add on of how it's like being a parent in Korea?
Yeah, so it's obviously not very easy at all. There's a lot of things that I have to think about since, you know, having a baby soon. We hope to put our daughter in a daycare center as well. And it's quite interesting though, even though we have this very low birth rate, there are massive lines for daycare centers. So it's going to take a while before we can even get accepted. And that's because of the low birth rate, a lot of daycare centers are shutting down, so there's only a few left. Then we need to worry about, obviously, living in general, right? Like, we want to raise our daughter in a very similar school from elementary to high school. Therefore, she can hopefully keep the same friends across her schooling life. We don't want to be one of those families that has to move different area to different area where she has to make new friends every 4 years. But given that, housing prices and everything that we've talked about in the show, that's also a big deal. Now, if she does choose to go to university, then we obviously have to think about education. As Chihi mentioned before, there's a lot of after-school programs, and they're not cheap, some costing minimum of up to, I guess, about $1,000 per month, and that's only one. And if you kind of like add it all together, it's I don't want to think about that actually. So these are very normal things to think as a parent, but in South Korea, I argue that it's actually more difficult.
It's more difficult, and we need to remember, as you mentioned, it's a really good point. Parenting doesn't stop when the child's like a toddler.
Yeah.
It goes on till university, especially here in Korea. Now, we asked what parenting is like in other parts of the world to our viewers as well. Here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. So Doina Arhar said in Romania, parents raise their children. As for me, my parents helped us, me and my husband, a lot in raising our kids as we worked at a fish farm in the countryside. Indian Rajput said in India, kids of above 3 years are the responsibility of the grandparents, but usually the entire family contributes. And June said in the UK, in theory both, but from my observation, the mom still carries more of the mental load of worrying about and organizing everybody, even when her partner is as hands-on as they can be. Now, our viewers did share their experiences and thoughts of what it's like to be a parent in other parts of the world, but would you guys like to elaborate a bit more on that?
Well, as the global population ages, more grandparents are taking on the responsibility to take care of their grandchildren. And also in countries like the US and UK, the trend is pretty similar to South Korea, where grandparents take up most of the childcare responsibilities. And also, I have an experience living in Thailand when I was young. And Walter, you mentioned that you have trust issues and you wouldn't want foreign domestic workers to be taking care of your child. But it was really interesting because I think it's because I grew up in the culture where having nannies or these domestic workers taking care of the housework as well as the caregiving for the children was a norm there. And they used to have many of the workers hired from Myanmar as well. So I'm more used to that kind of atmosphere and I would feel comfortable, I think, more than what Walter feels to hire foreign workers for my children. But then, like Yeon, you said, I think there should be strict guidelines to assure the quality as well as their rights as well if they're being treated well. Yeah.
We shouldn't look at this as like a short-term goal. It should be a long-term goal because birth rate, it's nothing. You have to be a bit more, you can't be myopic about it. What about you, Walter?
For me, like my experience was, living in Australia when I was young, my parents were both full-time workers. And I would only go to my grandparents' house during the school holidays. But when, after school and my parents couldn't pick me up, they would hire a babysitter or at least a neighbor to come pick me up and pay them money. That was sort of what I think Australia is more like.
I see. All right. And we're now going to include a fellow millennial from Korea who's a parent here and to hear what he has to say on today's issue. To find out a bit more about what parenting is like in Korea and whether the latest policies suggested by the government could be effective, we're going to talk to a fellow millennial. It's Park Suan, a father to 2 beautiful children. Welcome back, Suan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so Suan, could you first tell us about your 2 children and how are you and your wife looking after them?
Yeah, so I brought a picture right here if you guys can see it.
Oh, what a beautiful family.
Yeah, so these are the 2 boys that we're raising. The firstborn is 4, turning 5 soon. And the secondborn is 1, turning 2 soon.
Aww.
And we've been enjoying the process. We're really grateful for the family that we have. It's definitely a challenge, a lot that goes into being a parent. But there are some days where I'm like, I really want to take a break. But there are no breaks in parenting, and that's the reality. And I think we're learning, both my wife and I, we're learning to be more grateful than to complain about the harsh realities that we face.
Are you guys solely taking care of your children, or are you guys referring to the help of your parents as well?
Yeah, we are using the daycare at the moment. We're the main caregivers, and at times, on some incidents where we do need assistance, we would call our the grandparents to assist.
Completely understandable, yeah.
Well, I hear you're planning on having more kids. How did you come to this decision? Did any birth rate policies by the government play into your decision?
Yeah, so I did not expect me to say this on television first, but we haven't really, told people around us if we were like legitimately gonna go for our third. But yeah, we always had the plan. We always wanted to have at least three. Maybe like if things go right, we really wanted to have four kids and to have a big family like that. And so we will be looking into pursuing on having a third. Government policies, I'm grateful they're there, but they definitely, I don't think any parent would go into parenthood just by seeing the government policies, Like, it's good to know that the government wants us to be parents and to have more children. And it definitely helps to know that the whole country is in need. And so with the right mind, with the right chemistry, the parents could go in to have those challenges. But the government, I don't know. I don't think the government policies directly has played any role into our decision making.
Let's speak parent to parent. You and I are both fathers and we're very, very tired all the time. I don't think I've had a night sleep in a very long time. What is the hardest part of being a parent in Korea, do you think? I could talk about this all day. And what type of help do you want from the government?
Yeah, right there with you. I feel you. Even last night was not easy. This morning, not easy. And it's been like that for forever from my memory. To be honest with you, so I grew up in a country where there were only two climates, two weather changes, big weather changes. And it was, one was having a dry season and one was having a rainy season. So for me, like the temperature fluctuations in Korea, like being a parent in Korea, I did not expect that to be the biggest factor in raising our children. Like, it's very difficult in Korea to just let your kids loose out in the wild. It's very difficult because of the harsh weather changes. And, like even on the days that are good with good weather, there's always something you need to watch out for, whether that be, the air pollution, or different factors. So I think like I did not expect this being a parent in Korea, but the harsh climate changes that we have to face, 4 different harsh, very distinct season changes, that's really been like when I really, like to be honest with you, when I look at my kids, that's the biggest obstacle in raising kids in Korea.
Right. Is that because like, they could catch a cold or anything and you're worried about their health issues?
Right, yeah. Yeah, so health issue is the biggest thing. Like they're always sick, and I'm sure you can, empathize with me. They are always sick, and if you go to daycare, it's just a whole, one disease passing on, and it's like an endless cycle. And I think that has a big part of that has to do with such a big seasonal changes.
Right,
and
so
the second.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there. So would you like to see the government help with parents dealing with their kids' health issues then?
Yeah, for sure. With hospitals, I've been seeing on the news as well, like, the decline in hospitals not being able to sustain themselves because of these issues. Definitely that needs assistance as well. And I think in terms of what I expect from the government is to just keep up the good work. I am very grateful with all the things that the government is trying to do. Keep it up. But the main factor, I think, realistically, when I look at my friends, when I look at, people my age, is to really change the work culture in the workforce. To be able to assist parents to have, perhaps, like with COVID, there was a huge change in the work culture, right? Every company needed to provide the right flexible, with all the flexible hours that you're able to have to be able to work from home. Like that kind of culture needs to go on to parents as well, so that the parents feel comfortable. Oh, maybe with like a simple assistance of daycare, I can still keep my job.
Exactly, helping parents out with all different parts.
Such a huge.
It is one, and we would love to talk about this in more depth, but due to time, I have to cut you off right here. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you today. All right, and very
Thanks for
briefly,
having
Walter.
me.
No worries. Briefly, Walter, parent to parent, what would you like to see happen from now on in a sentence or two?
I would like to see more subsidies, of course. Cheaper nappies, formula, anything that we need for our baby that needs to be replenished every week. So just more money.
More money.
More money, please.
All right, and what about you, Chi?
And
One
change
sentence?
in work culture.
Change in work culture, too.
Fathers also taking leaves for childcare, becoming a norm, natural, yeah.
All right, and hopefully all these solutions brought up to the table would be taken into account. Until then, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chi
Thank you.
and Walter Lee.
Love to be here.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.